particularly this year, if Hillary Clinton wins, it's really going to be by virtue of the black vote and these identity politics because of this fear
of the black vote,
white supremacy and the fear of Donald Trump and all of these things that play into just controlling and manipulating the black vote. Yes, I said it. Let me say one other thing, and I'm going to throw it to you guys. We, forever and a day, have always said that Republicans are uninformed, low-information voters voting against their best economic interest. And now when we look at the Democratic vote in general, especially the Democratic vote for people who make less than $250,000 a year or $100,000 a year, in that bracket, if you make less than that and you're voting for the status quo Democratic Party, you are voting against your best economic interest. Now, you are either therefore a low-information voter or you are just so obsessed with identity politics that you can't see the forest for the trees. But all of a sudden, when we apply the same exact logic that we talk about the Republican Party with, we apply that to the Democratic Party, all of a sudden we are condescending. All of a sudden we are lecturing. All of a sudden we have privilege. All of a sudden we suffer from white supremacy, even black folks. You know, I'm a white supremacist to some other black folks. But that's how ridiculous and how manipulative the Democratic Party has become with identity politics, and you see that just running rampant in this election. And I'm at the point where I'm through. I'm through. I don't even want to hear about race at a certain point. I mean, I know it's a real issue that we're going to have to talk about probably tomorrow because some stupid shit is going to happen somewhere in America again. But it's used as a tool of manipulation, man, to keep us from having these conversations. All the while, they keep tracking back to the right, further and further and further to the right, to their neoliberal wet dreams. Anybody who wants that, I don't know, or we could talk about the next subject.
I posted this link, and it talks about, it's an endorsement of a newspaper, the New York Amsterdam News. And it's a very popular newspaper with African Americans in the area, and their endorsement, I'll just quote this one paragraph to show you just how far they're willing to go. While Senator Bernie Sanders believes that he is a revolutionary who will change the face of politics and claims to have been part of the good fight for decades, we ask at the Amsterdam News if he has been part of the struggle. Did we miss all those protests in Milan about voter suppression and civil rights? And the answer to that question is yes, you literally did.
Well, I'm confused because that seems to imply that somehow Hillary Clinton was conversely involved in the civil rights movement. And I'm sorry that in 1996, as First Lady, there's the interview. 1996 as First Lady, when she talks about how proud she was of her Goldwater Girl days and her conservative background, Republican upbringing. So yeah, I mean, the Amsterdam News is very popular back in New York. But this is how deeply entrenched, like everyone's like, I don't understand. Here's the thing. Again, this is like the fiercest political machine in politics. Like, seriously, they have been around for the last almost 30 years. So they've been building this support like almost the entire time. You know, by the time she's coming back to, by the time they move, just Scandal is totally them. They moved to to New York State so that she has a chance of becoming senator there, because they just roll out the red carpet because they built those relationships. Where can we let's throw a dart? Where can we move? Because they didn't go back to Arkansas, right? They didn't go back to Arkansas, which was their home, right, before coming to D.C. They didn't go back to Illinois, which was her home because that's where she's from. They went and sat down roots in New York. But conversely, so that's interesting. You know, Bernie had the huge rally tonight in the Bronx.
Yes, talk about that.
In the South Bronx, overflow was our own David did not get in, but he got to sit on the hillside and watch. And I think Bernie said it was about 15,000 people. I know I've seen reports on Twitter upwards of 20,000 or so, but that's huge. And the pictures of the crowds have been extremely diverse. A lot of Latino and Black representation, you know, people with their kids, like all types of stuff. And this is in the middle of an urban neighborhood, and I believe the Bronx Borough president said they are the largest Democratic county in the country. So that's huge. And I think it's interesting, too, when you look at, like, what's going on with the dynamics in Harlem in particular, right? There is an account that Charlie Rangel was bragging about how a pastor, a reverend in Harlem, the Sanders campaign wanted to rent his church for an event. Just rent it. They didn't want them to endorse. They won't even rent because we're all for Hillary. So this is decades of building these relationships, and that's fine. That's how you want to do things. But this is why I keep saying, this is why other people keep saying, grassroots has to step up. This is the only way that we will actually have a chance. No whining about how, they have all the people, they have all the news. We're not going to win anyway if we don't step it up. But the last thing I'll say, then I'll give it back to you because it's your show. There's a poll out of Wisconsin. And you know what? I don't really trust polls, so everybody phone bank, canvas, get out the vote this weekend. Wisconsin votes August 5th. But there's a poll that says that Bernie is up 11 points amongst African American voters.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie is up 11 points in this poll. It's a small sample size, but they extrapolate those sample sizes any other time. So it's really interesting. It's really interesting stuff going on.
You know what's going to happen? The next argument is going to be, but it's not a predominantly, it has such a small population of African Americans.
Well, that was the same argument in terms of Minnesota, as well as in Kansas is a state that no one ever talks about. I think it was 9 out of 10 districts that were predominantly black. Bernie won overwhelmingly. But
they're not really black because it's not like Atlanta black, right?
Yeah, I've seen pictures of people in Wisconsin who are black use mayonnaise. I don't know if they're really black. I don't know if we count them.
Oh, I don't like mayonnaise.
Bernie made me white, right? Seriously,
it's
crazy.
Completely disregard. Like you're from Kansas, so you're not really black. You can't really.
That gets back to the identity politics thing, right? Like you're not really black, so only a really black. Like that's this whole notion that somehow we're privileged because we support Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
No, I'm tired of crap. Like I wasn't taught to roll over for the establishment.
Is this a political paper brown test? Like this?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a political paper bag test. Like that's exactly what it is. Because
the sickest part about it, Anoa, is that this is on behalf of not a black candidate, but a white woman who is just as complicit with some of the biggest problems in the black community.
It's that plantation mentality, right? Like you gotta love.
Come on, don't throw the plantation out there.
Well, no, it is, and I mean, really, I think of it as the Miss Millie syndrome, or Miss Ann, but Sister Soldier in her timepiece late last year, so like November, October or so, pointed out that in her opinion, she was asked about the infamous, statements that she made back in the early '90s when Bill Clinton was president, or was running, or I'm young, I forget my dates sometimes, but But she would not give them a direct quote. She had her quote already written out on a card and handed to them. And basically what she said was that to her, Hillary Clinton was the master's wife who overlooked over the plantation and benefited from, the exploitation of everyone else around her. I tend to think she's like Miss Millie.
Here, let's have a bit of self-reflection here, because you just brought out the plantation narrative, and whenever I hear the plantation narrative come from a conservative, I'm like, go to hell, right? Now, at what point will we say, was there something to what some of these black conservatives have said that black people in the Democratic Party are on the plantation of the Democratic Party?
So I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree. What I do disagree with is this blind allegiance they have to a party that is absolutely freaking racist and means black people no good at all. Like Clarence Thomas and other black Republicans, they literally they exist. And within such a toxic environment, it's almost as if they have whitewashed themselves to be there. Like okay. I think about Colin Powell.
I want to pass the mic on because I want to get everybody's response to that. Nick, I heard you getting ready to say something.
Yeah, I don't like the plantation narrative because I don't think it's necessarily like Stockholm syndrome or something like that where we're, in support of our oppressors. I really do believe that we have a case where, a large number of our, people just aren't aware. And it's really not directly there. Like to people that think about things or that analyze structures or somebody that can abstract really well, it's evident that we have, clear problems, but you won't find many people, like average people, that can really identify what's happening to them and why they're in the situation they're in. Most of the time, thanks to the culture of individualism, they think it's their own personal failing rather than a policy problem.
I had Like, I had a thought about this a few days ago when when the bird thing happened and people were making like all those Sparrow Party emblems, like this is what they'd have as a third party, the picture of the logo of the bird.
Yeah, I don't
and
like
it got me thinking, if as a kind of a thought experiment, if something happened like this election, there was a schism in the Democratic Party, like Bernie won a slight majority of pledged delegates, but the superdelegates rigged it for Hillary Clinton or something like that, and it caused a schism where all the progressives finally had enough of the Democratic Party and started their own third party and made a party for the Occupy movement and economic reform and immigration reform now and climate change reform now, and then the platform of Black Lives Matter and even reparations, major economic reform for the black community. In that situation, would the Black Party make the move? And that's the conflict I had between what Anoa is saying and what Nick is saying. Because there is that hesitation with talking about, is it a Stockholm syndrome, is it a plantation mentality? But I thought long and hard, would black Democrats switch to a progressive party if given the opportunity? What do you think?
I don't think plantation syndrome and Stockholm syndrome are necessarily the same thing. But I don't think that many of them would change because it's comfortable, it's what they know, it's secure, they're taken care of, they're fed. And while the average person may not know X, Y, and Z, there are a lot of very educated, that are clapping so hard against all types of information available to them. There are educated people, there are people with JDs, PhDs, MBAs, who are trying to convince us that money is not an issue, that none of this stuff is an issue, and that we need to follow Hillary Clinton because she's the way. So either they just selling us, a hustle, or but a lot of people seem to believe it.
Let me. I want to get some. If you could, because okay. So the question was, and then this is worthwhile. The question is, based on what Anoa said, we're self-reflecting on this black conservative narrative that they always push. And anytime a white conservative says, I want to bitch slap their asses. This is not something for white conservatives to say. Black conservatives, you barely get away with it, but it's a moment of reflection here, right? Anoa is saying initially that it's a plantation mentality for some black people, and not necessarily a Stockholm, but possibly some traits of Stockholm, according to Nick's interpretation. Nick, yours was, if I could summarize it again, and I think I just lost it. Summarize yours really quick so I can get the totality of it.
Mine was just that it's not clear that the policy is the problem, not necessarily the party. The policies are hurting them. They're not clear that it's the policies that are hurting them. Yeah, they think it's them.
Right. Okay. So it's like that meritocracy kind of seeped into the thinking. And then Solomon, you didn't really say which way you fall. You just feel like they perhaps would not go which way.
I'm afraid to answer my own question. Because I don't.
I know you didn't answer it. So my thing is actually goes back to exactly what Anoa was getting off into, and that's why I cut you off, because I ain't gonna let you steal my fire on everything. No, I'm joking. But no, for real. What I honestly believe is that there are enough middle class African Americans who are doing well enough in this democratic paradigm and their influence reaches far beyond just their own pocketbook, right? If you listen to Yvette Carnell, she puts it so brilliantly. She's like, you're talking to your homeboy, you're talking to your Sarah. Your Sarah is doing so good. She just got from D.C. Like, I know people exactly like that. Just came back from D.C. working for the establishment. You have enough black people eating at the table of the benefits coming from this economic paradigm, including the democratic establishment, that they have no economic reason to do anything different than what they're currently doing. And this is what I try to express to a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters. Them voting, this block of African Americans voting for Hillary Clinton, they are actually voting in their best economic interest. So this is where I get back to these irreconcilable differences, is that even with progressives, white progressives, and black progressives, and black Democrats, I just think we are coming to the parting of our ways. It's the parting of the ways. We just don't have enough in common politically, electorally anymore to really say that we have reason to be voting with the same black middle class people to upper middle class who are making $200,000.
Low-income blacks, they voted for Hillary in the South quite a bit.
That's a different group.
So,
that's a different group, and I think the influence that's on them goes to that. It's the influence. I can summarize it there. It's the tentacles of that middle class and that aspirational class that is trickling down to them and just bringing them along. So there is a very intellectual group.
I think it goes back to Nick's point some too about how people just aren't aware, because like I'm saying, like the statistics, because like I said, you have people, we have people, there are other tweets, we saw people who are sitting right here in the South talking about how Bernie only talks about white issues, and we're talking about, you know, poverty and people struggling to work, and you look at the statistics of black people in the South and they're alarming. And these same people, like Solomon's pointing out, are voting for the candidate that's not putting anything on the table to address any of their issues. You know, but they're being because for people to keep their positions of power, we keep acting like just because we're all black that somehow they're looking out for us, or they got people need to keep their positions of power. People need to keep their place at the table, and you are a deliverable. Plain and simple. You are deliverable. I get my position because you're going to come along and do what I'm saying you need to do. Like, I think it was Morning Joe, I can't remember his name, had the president of the Urban League on, and this was like leading up into, you know, the South Carolina and Georgia and stuff, and he was saying, like, they were with Morning Joe, you know, I don't like him, but he pushes back in some ways that no one else will do on MSNBC in particular, but he was asking him, like, you know, why would you not support Bernie Sanders, or why this or why that? And he was just saying, like, you know, there's some benefit to supporting Hillary Clinton because, you know, she's going to provide leadership opportunities for people in her cabinet. Okay. So we all should get behind Hillary Clinton because she's going to provide cabinet positions for black people.
Right.
Which is cool. You know, George Bush had a whole bunch of black people and people of color in his cabinet. But I mean, that does not trickle down to the rest of us.
It is what you called it. You called it earlier this year when we first got to know each other. Noah, you called it trickle down feminism, corporate feminism.
Corporate feminism does not trickle down.
Yeah, the Twitter version of that now is McFeminism, I think it's called, right?
Is it mixed feminism? Yeah. Oh, I love it.
That's what the guy from called it.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. It's like McRacism, right? It is trickling. It doesn't trickle down, but it's the hope and the aspiration of the Negro that they'll see somebody. You know, come on. It's like we have to understand our economic interests. It's unfortunately, let me say this about what Nick, you've used this word twice tonight, the collectivism versus individualism. And unfortunately, that individualism has creeped in so heavily into what was once a black community that our interests are just no longer aligned. And I don't know if they have ever really always been aligned, but right now we're just at a divergent point. And
I think that's why they focus so much on race, because race has been the one thing that has always kept us all together. Yep. Race and the oppression that has been collectively experienced as a whole. Once you take race out of the equation, we got
no reason. Once you stop fearing,
we're all over.
We are all over the spectrum. Was that what you're about to say?
Yeah, I mean, we're all over the spectrum. Like, and it's not that race does not matter or it's not important. Everybody with that, we're all human or we're all from Africa stuff. I've said it before. Please stop saying that shit.